Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games deep dive review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, a streamer, YouTube creator, host of Playlog Podcast, and he finds time to take care of all of the neighborhood cats. Welcome, Danny Bass Jr., but you may know him as CGDannyB. Danny, welcome.
Yo, what's poppin', Dave? How's it going, dude?
Going great, man. I'm happy to have you on the show finally. We've been trying to get something in the works for a while now. We finally got it going today. We got a really interesting game to talk about, too.
Yeah, we do. I blame you for this one. I had I was going to say happy week, and then I remembered I had just finished Night in the Woods and then had to power through this. I'm like, man, I need to play something happy soon.
You had a pretty cathartic week. Yeah.
It's been a time. It's been a time.
Yeah. Today, the two of us are going to talk about A Space for the Unbound, which is an adventure game developed by Mojiken Studio and published by Toge Productions for all contemporary platforms in 2023. And if this is your first time listening to the show, first of all, thank you for stopping by. Here's how spoilers work. For about the first half of this episode, we're going to go spoiler-free. And then afterwards, we're going to warn you when the spoilers begin. You can check down in the show notes for a timestamp for when the spoilers are coming. But if you have not played A Space for the Unbound, and it's a game with a very emotional and affecting story, you don't want to find out what happens at the end before you play it, I don't think. So you can listen to this for a while, and then we'll warn you when spoilers are coming. So what is A Space for the Unbound? I say it is a suburban fantasy point-and-click adventure, which is firmly rooted in its Indonesian setting, while also exploring emotional and supernatural elements. Danny, what's the pitch for you?
I had put it is a cozy, in air quotes, 2D adventure game matched with an over-the-top slice of life anime.
Yeah.
And maybe the over-the-top helps sell it, but those slice of lives, they be anything. You'll have one happy day and next thing you're hit by a truck and who knows what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. I played this on PC. It took me 10 hours to get through it. And a quick shout out, I got the game as a gift from a friend of the show, Matt, aka Stormageddon. So thank you, Matt, for gifting me this game. Very nice of you. But I played it on Steam, and mostly on Steam, although I did do some Steam Deck. It worked perfectly over there. Danny, how'd you play this? How long did it take you?
I also played it on Steam. Matt didn't buy me my copy, so Matt, what's up with that? But my Steam clock says about 14 and a half hours. I know that is also like stepping away, letting it sit on the Steam Deck. So that's probably about 4 hours more than it should be. But yeah, also started on desktop, jumped to Steam Deck, docked, ran perfect. There was one point, I think, where I had some just loading issues, just closed and relaunched. And I just don't know if that was just the Steam Deck set on for like 4 days. And it's like, I need a nap. Let me relax for a sec. But yeah, no, it ran great on Steam Deck, especially docked. Yeah, I'd say about 10 and a half hours.
Yeah, it's so not a super short game, but not crazy long either. It's a good, I think that sweet spot 5 to 15 hours for a lot of games works pretty well. So how did we come across this game? We'll start out like we do every episode, talking about our histories with A Space for the Unbound. So Danny, we'll start with you. I know I gave you a list of possibilities, and then we finally settled on this game. But you had already said like you'd been meaning to play it. So how did it come on your radar?
Yeah, it was one of those type of games that there's always these, again, I put the air quotes on cozy, but one of those types of, I'll put air quotes on relaxing as well type of games where I'm like, I want to check this one out. It's just right now I'm playing XYZ. If I recall, I believe Kyle from 6-1, I mentioned it to him. He's like, dude, I love the game. It was really great. So it's been on my wish list. And I'm like, I'll get to that one of these days. It's just, when is that chord going to get struck? And they were like, hey, but I don't know if you're interested in Spatially Unbound. I'm like, you know what? We could push that because it's sitting in the cart. And then right on time for the Steam summer sale where it was on sale, I would think somewhere between like $5 and $8 or something like that. So I'm like, you know what? Let's pull the trigger. Let's do it.
There we go. Yeah. I had also kind of heard about this from other friends, podcasters, and stuff. I didn't like catch it through I guess you'd say, traditional marketing. I never heard of it before it came out, but as soon as it came out, it started to get praise for the story and the setting and stuff. And I think it was mostly friend Jake at the Pre-Order Bonus podcast who was kind of shouting this game out. Jake often has his ear to indie releases really well. So the other thing that appealed to me was I really love games that are set in real world settings that are not like the United States and Japan and Western Europe. You know, I like to see those real life experiences, and it's mostly coming up in indie games. And I did a whole episode about games like that. And this was one that we had kind of been like, hey, wasn't there that game set in Indonesia? Kind of forget the name, but here we are. So I've actually been to Indonesia a couple times traveling. So that's a little bit of connection to this setting. And I always love when people are able to tell their stories. Indie games are perfect for that. Game making tools are so much more accessible now. And I just love that we're able to get games like this with more regularity now.
Yeah, you mentioned like indie games having those like the willingness to do other things that a lot of AAAs won't, whether that's touching in different parts of the world that most games don't take place in or anything like that. Behind the scenes, I've wrapped this game up about 2.5 hours prior to sitting down to record.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me see what other people are thinking. So I pulled up like somebody's YouTube breakdown, and I remember the way they described it. I wish I had the phrasing, but they basically said like the gameplay wasn't up to snuff in a way because it was like an indie game. And I'm like, well, that's a terrible way to look at it. It's an awful way to look at it. I think stylistically and genre wise, there's just things that people choose to do in the best medium to tell their story, whether that's personal one from the heart, it's a made up one that's inspired by real life events, whatever the case is. I think it does a great job of like, I guess, blurring those lines of like, we're set in a real life situation, but all the things going on, very unrealistic, very fantasy. And I think it all blends really well.
Yeah, for sure. So like with that person's, I guess, critique that you had mentioned, I don't agree that it's because an indie game. That's right. That's dog shit to me. But I do kind of agree that like the gameplay is kind of what held this back for me. There's a section in the middle of the game where the story is like kind of trying to find its footing, and the gameplay got really tedious for me. I didn't really enjoy it at all. But I kind of liken this to like if you're watching a gymnastics routine and the gymnast like starts out pretty strong, has some like stumbles in the middle, so like their score is going to get docked, you know, but then they finish it so incredibly that like you don't remember what happened in the middle because the thing that happened at the end was so fucking cool. That's how I feel about this game. And so there's going to be like a distinction, I think, between how I felt about the game right when I finished it, like where all of those memories were fresh, the frustration and boredom I felt in the middle, frankly, and then like how strong it finished, the distinction between that feeling and then how I feel now, because I beat this game maybe 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Okay.
So like what I remember are the most impactful things. And like as we get further and further away from it, that's what I'm going to remember the most. I'm going to remember basically the whole thing as like one package, we'll say, and not necessarily those individual things along the way, right? Like a more holistic memory that is really impacted by how this game ends. I think the ending is incredibly strong. So anything in the middle that kind of was frustrating or boring to me is going to kind of fade as we go. So we'll dig into those as we go, because we do, we talk about the entire experience, but that's just kind of how I felt about it at the beginning. Kind of an uneven journey through it, and then the ending and like finding out what the story is actually about is incredibly good.
Yeah, the way you use like gymnastics as the example, you're going to get a lot of anime references today, so stick with me here. But yeah, I think around the same spot we're probably talking about, that middle lull. It was one of those, we have the main story, we have the canon stuff going on, and we get this filler arc right in the middle, where it's just like the characters I don't really care all that much about. We're doing extra tasks where I'm like, we did stop right before this big battle or before this big dramatic moment, and now I'm just kind of doing what is still, by the end of the chapter, still pushing forward to like the narrative we're going. But I'm like, can we speed this up a little bit? Can we get past this part? I don't want to be here. I just want to get back to like my characters, the people I'm interested in.
Yeah, I bring on the anime references. They'll be for my audience and not for me. I'm not an anime guy, but I will make the comparison. Like, I was a big Dragon Ball Z fan growing up. And so when I think about my memories of Dragon Ball Z, I think of all the cool fights and stuff. And I don't necessarily remember how they would spend 2 episodes, powering up and staring at each other.
Screaming and getting glowy hair all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of how this is as time moves forward. But we'll put a pin in the discussion here. We'll listen to a bit of music from A Space for the Unbound. And when we come back, we'll set up the story. A Space for the Unbound takes place in Indonesia, which is the game director's home country. So again, we have these close and personal settings in video games, which I love. The game opens as your main playable character named Atma is helping his friend Nirmala finish the story that she was writing. They're kind of working together, creative writing, little fun, hanging out in a trailer as you do. A rainstorm comes and Nirmala gets stuck in the rising water in the river that she decided to cross. Atma goes to try to help her and he's washed away as he tries to save her. During this section, you're introduced to a primary game mechanic, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, where you can dive into people's subconscious, kind of like in Persona 5 or something like that. So Atma wakes up, realizes he's been dreaming. He's asleep in his classroom. He's in high school, and his girlfriend named Raya wakes him up. Raya looks exactly the same as Nirmala, and the dream kind of bothers Atma because of how lifelike it felt. And so I think that like the game begins with this dream sequence, and then he wakes up in school. We have this high school setting. They introduce a lot of stuff to kind of hook you in right at the beginning, like with this opening dream, and then finding out like, oh, it was a dream, but it's really similar to real life. So what's going on here? I was really intrigued by how this opened.
Yeah, I as I'm watching this, I remember looking like that's not the girl from the cover art. So what is like what's going on here? Oh, prelude, whatever's starting with it. And as we have that moment, we like wake up at the desk. I'm like, okay, so there's multiple paths this can go. And my brain's already picking it's either this, or this. And we'll go to spoilers on what happened yet till later.
Yeah.
But I sat there, I'm like, very similar characters, but is it supposed to be like I lost a friend, but I found a new friend that reminds me a lot of the original friend. And that's kind of what I stuck with for the very beginning of the game. And I'm like, okay, so similar characteristics and then establishing like where this friendship is going and relationship is going and what the two of them are doing like throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, it really got my curiosity going. I didn't do a whole lot of like theory crafting, but I was very interested in learning what is going on here, because even before playing this, I knew that it had a supernatural element to it and like a fantasy element. So I knew that like this isn't just going to be high school kids doing high school kid things. There's going to be something cool and weird here. So I was really interested by that. So Atma and Raya decide they're going to skip their afternoon classes and go out on the town and do some fun stuff. And this is kind of that slice of life stuff that you were talking about earlier, Danny. Going out, helping some neighborhood cats. They go see a movie together. They go, get some snacks and stuff like that. And this slice of life stuff continues for a little while in the game. But it's an early point of emphasis, like Atma and Raya hanging out. They decide to write down their bucket list of stuff that they want to do together. It's a really cute opening, and like you said, kind of gives you that sense that this is a cozy and relaxing game, and it is for a lot of it. Like there is combat, but it's not like combat,
yes.
like video game combat. There's a little kind of timing based combat mini game, we'll say. But for a lot of it,
simple.
you are just going around town, doing some cozy stuff, helping some cats out, buying snacks. They go see a movie, stuff like that. You learn eventually that Raya has reality-altering superpowers. This is that fantasy and supernatural element to it. So after they see the movie, in the movie there is a quote, a cat wonderland. So Raya creates this so that they can go experience this. But something goes wrong. This is like the big fantasy supernatural hook to it. The cats turn up and yell at them to get out of this dream world because, quote, the end is near. And so we have this like looming apocalyptic event now. When they get out of the theater, things have gotten weird in the real world. The evil cats are out there. It feels like Raya's dream world and the real world are blurring together. Raya uses her superpower to fix things, but the strain of this makes her collapse, and then a big crack forms in the sky overhead. And so I was hooked by like that opening where you have like the dream very close to reality, and then this is the supernatural hook. And I was like, okay, I'm all the way in after this. This is the last plot that I'm going to like give in the non-spoiler part, by the way. This is where we'll cut it. But this was very interesting as like, you know, this all happens within the first hour of the game.
Yeah, it's they start early, right? You mentioned they leave school to kind of be like, let's just go do some things for fun. That all kind of stems from the one teacher, like the super hard ass, is just like, hey, we need those like career aptitude tests filled in. We need to know you're in high school. You got to have your whole life figured out right now. So make sure you turn that into me. Which is just like all right, we need to get out of here. We need to go do something else more fun. I think the first instance you see that Raya has some kind of magical ability is like, go to the store. We found this cat, like go buy some cat food. And you're like, I don't have any money. She's like, did you check your pocket? And there's this little twinkle. Yeah, right. And he like reaches like, I guess I do have money. Okay. And you're like, all right. And at this point I'm like, oh, she got a little something. She's just like some sleight of hand craziness, like magical sleight of hand, not world manipulating powers or whatever. Like it's something simple. And then, we get to the theater and all this like cats and the employees like hunched over the counters ready to like pounce and do everything else. Like, okay, that's not normal for a movie theater worker.
This should not be happening. Yeah. And so Raya has her powers. Atma has his powers. He uses this book, like we said, to kind of dive into people's subconscious and help them out. So both of our, main characters have these superpowers, basically. So again, not going to talk about anything else that happens plot-wise. You just know like there's this looming apocalyptic event. These worlds are kind of blurring together. We're not sure what's going to cause the apocalyptic event, but the cats say the end is near, so, it's coming. So,
thanks, cats.
You mentioned something that I thought was really good about this game and kind of introducing some themes that the game touches on. This idea of teenage life, since they are high school characters, and the game does begin with one of their teachers having them fill out these aptitude tests, and they talk about how they feel pressure to do well and have their life figured out, just like a lot of teenagers feel that pressure to have everything figured out when you're 17 years old and stuff like that. So the game does touch on that. It touches on bullying. It touches on loss and grief throughout the game. There is a content warning on the game startup screen for these things and for suicide. So as that is something that if you are sensitive to those things, please be wary of that because it's a thing that happens in the game. So it is a game that touches on these real world themes and then goes into some very, very heavy and sad things. I think we hinted at it at the beginning, but this is a game that brought tears to my eyes several times throughout playing it. For different reasons we'll talk about in the spoiler section. But how did you think the game handled these themes?
I think, especially with indie games now, there's a lot of games that will either full send into topics like this, or they're like, hey, we're going to remotely mention it. So just know ahead of time, like something's going to come up. So you kind of have this entire spectrum of how intense it's going to be. And I think progressively as you go through the game, you see some of these themes like really kick off. again, with like, Raya and like kind of her family situation, like that gets really intense at some points. It's kind of like a super major point that'll come up later. The bullying starts very much just like, loser in high school, but then that gets more intense.
Yep.
So like, if for any reason it's like, oh, that's the highest it's going to go, like it will get a little more intense. It's a lot. But I think it's handled very tastefully. It doesn't feel like it's done for like let's just make a bad character do bad things. Like anyone who's seen, as a weird comparison, 13 Reasons Why, like there's some intense things in there that I'm like, I don't think we needed to go that far. I think that's a little bit much. Like anyone with the bathroom stall scene, you know what I'm talking about? That was kind of crazy. Why'd we do that? So yeah, no, this doesn't do anything to that degree, but I think everything that happens is setting up for like why this character's upset, why this character's in the mindset that they are. But yeah, I mentioned this again, right after playing Night in the Woods. I've come to the point in my life where not all games are fun, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy them. And I think things like Last of Us 2, Night in the Woods, where I'm like, this experience was something I enjoyed. Was I happy the entire time? Absolutely not. I also cried a lot more at the end. I have a selfie ready for whenever this goes out, like, hey, the new episode, I'm going to retweet. I'm like, I blame Dave for this moment. And then there's just like the tear running down my face in contemplation. I'm like, damn, we did it. But yeah, no, these themes, they're there. They're very prevalent. I was about to say good time, not a good time, but
yeah, but valuable. And you're in good company because we, on this show, I say we, it's me, but like the guests that I bring on too, I think we're all pretty much of a like mind that, video games don't have to be fun. That was a thing, decades ago, but nowadays video games have a lot more to offer. And if they're giving you a window into somebody's story like this, then there's value there too. And I do agree with you that the heavier themes, including depression is another one I mentioned. I didn't mention earlier, but that's a heavy one in the game too. And I think that stuff is handled really well, especially when considering how other characters interact with characters that are very depressed. I thought that was really good in this game and really well realized and intelligent in that way. So I agree. I think that it starts out with that kind of happy-go-lucky slice of life adventure that you're going on, and it progressively gets deeper and darker as you go. And then the ending is very, very powerful, I'll say. Which leads into, I think, my biggest critique about this game, which I mentioned earlier, which is that I think this game takes too long to introduce what it's actually about. And it takes too long to get... This is going to sound harsh, but we're recording, and I can't think of a better way to say this, but it takes too long to get to the point, in my opinion.
Okay. No, I see it.
Like, we get inklings that something's up, but then we will go like 3, 4, 5 hours doing things that are not really related to what this game is ultimately about. And if I'm thinking about somebody who's playing this and is more likely to put a game down, I would guess that a lot of people are not going to get to the end. If they feel like, if they experience this story with the same peaks and valleys that I did, but they're not driven to finish the game like I'm driven to finish most games that I finish or play, regardless of whether I'm podcasting or not. I think that there was a point where I would have put this game down if I had a different relationship with finishing games. And I do think that it just like I said, it sticks the landing incredibly well, but it's pretty backloaded as far as like what I would call the important stuff. And I guess your mileage is going to vary whether that slice of life is how far that's going to go for you before we get to that end.
Yeah, I definitely see that like in myself as well. If this wasn't, hey, I got to get this done for the podcast, I got to play this, I could easily have seen like a time where I'm like, I think I can put this down for a couple days, go play something else, something a little bit happier, something to just like then cycle back into this. Like I mentioned earlier, it's definitely that like middle chapter lull for me.
Yeah.
I think as someone who enjoys their occasional like slice of life where I'm like, whatever goofy events are taking place, like I'm here for it. I'm along for the ride. I thoroughly enjoyed the like backtracking and running around the map where like I run into someone that's just like, man, I lost my dog toy. My dog got away and I can't get him to come back. So I'm like, let's go find where that is. Then you run into the bully who's got the dog toy. I'm like, cool. He's like, you're not getting this back unless you get a cigar. I'm like, oh, I did talk to that guy. And then I'm running back up the street and he's like, here you go, kid. And then chain reaction, event after event. And like, I enjoyed that. And I think even though those were still kind of steps away from the story, I was still invested in that gameplay loop. Whereas again, back with like chapter 3, there are these, you go into these Persona-esque like Mind Palace type deals to deal with people, but none of the information you need's there. So you have to go back out, and then that backtracking is very just like annoying. I'm like, I don't want to do all this. Can I just get like this narrative point out of the way? Especially, like I said before, it doesn't relate to like our characters, our 2 main characters directly. It's like by proxy, like 2-3 tiers out. So it's like, I'll get through this to get through it. But yeah, outside of doing it for content or anything, I could definitely see that being the lull in which I'm like, let's see if I get away from this or not.
Yeah, chapter 3 was the part for me too. And it's exactly like you said. So like when I say it takes too long to get to the good point or the good part or get to the point, you're introduced to what like the main thing becomes. And then chapter 3 comes along, you know that there's this very important thing that you should be working towards, and the game is not letting you progress towards that. You're off doing, like you said, these secondary, tertiary, whatever the fuck the word is for 4th level.
Quadrutiary.
There we go. That is a $95 word. You're off doing those things, and they're kind of related, but they're not. They're not related to the most important thing. They're not related to what I want to be doing. So, like you said, when you get into those backtracking adventure game puzzle loops where you're like, I need this thing, so I got to go out of this level, it's the dream, and go over to this part and get this thing, but it's locked, so now I got to go get a key. Then I take the key back, I unlock the thing, I get the item I needed, I go back into the thing. And this is like 2 or 3 hours of this. And like, I'm not making any progress toward finding out what's going on in the story. It's just, it feels like, I don't want to say it feels like filler because you're learning about characters and stuff like that, but it's not what I wanted to be doing. And so I do think the pacing is pretty rough in that middle section. And that's exactly what I had written down in the notes too. So I'm glad you brought that up. So as we said at the beginning, this is an interesting game to critique, because when we're talking about the experience of playing this game and everything that the game puts on the table for you and has you do, a lot of this, like we've said, this middle section, I don't think is very good, and it's not really additive to the game. It harmed my experience with it. But then when the game finally opens up and allows you to know what this is actually about, and then goes through that sequence of, this is what this game is about, this is what this story is about, this is how these events unfold and how it concludes. All of that is so good that with time, and when I don't have the critic's hat on, I will look back at this story and be like, I love what this story did. I love what this story is about. It's just the experience of getting to that was a rocky road, we'll say.
Yeah. That'll be if I would ever replay, that is I'm at this part. That is the one you're like, how do I power through? Because I could easily see something I'll typically do, depending, if it's less narrative heavy, I'll often have some kind of show or podcast or something playing as I'm powering through. But since this one's so dialogue heavy, it is like, let me focus up. I could see in a case where you have to replay, I'm like, cool, let's throw on something on Netflix now because I'm ready to just knock this part out. And then once that's done, again, full focus on the game. That's a very just secondary kind of, I could do without it, but I got to get through it.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that. I don't think this is a game that I'll replay. I think I'm happy with just experiencing the story one time. And I don't replay a lot of games anyway, so that's not really a dig at this game in particular.
Sure.
But the other thing I think I want to mention about the story is that Indonesian setting, this suburban Indonesian setting. This is fairly different to areas in Indonesia where I've traveled, and so I'm interested to like experience, in quotes, these places. And I liked the like little bits of culture that even I, with my outsider's perspective, could see and feel, I think, with how like tight knit this community is and how people know each other, how they speak to each other. Characters are memorable, I would say. And there is this like this feeling of community, I think, in this place that I could feel. And so I did enjoy this setting. You know, it's one thing to have a game set in a place, but it's another thing on top of that to make that place feel like its own character in a way. The way that, you know, if you play the Yakuza games, the neighborhood of Kamurocho is like its own character, basically. And I did get that feeling from the town here. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I as someone far less well-traveled, this is going into it. This was very much like my first instinct in any kind of action movie where you have like the villain or the hero who's trying to get out of the job, like hiding away somewhere quiet where it's like no one in the US government's going to find me here. Like it was that kind of smaller type neighborhood.
Yeah.
But seeing that, like you said, fleshed out and being like, oh, here's these characters I mentioned earlier with like the shopkeepers, like, you want the cigar? But everyone kind of felt like they were having those. Hey, good to see you again. How the family? Yeah. How the kids? Good. Like there was a pre-established world here where these people already know each other, which saying that out loud, and as we get further in, I'm like, oh, interesting. Let's establish some things. But yeah, like you're seeing people that you as the player don't know, but you as Atma or you as Rhea, you're like, okay, yeah, I had this conversation before. Like, oh yeah, we worked on a project together last year. Or like, oh yeah, we have an English class together. And these characters exist with pre-established relationships. And that was really cool. I like that. I'm not being like, oh, nice to meet you, person I've gone to school with for 12 years. Like they're not meeting them as I'm meeting them. It's almost like hey, Danny, nice. Let me introduce you to my friend in this game here.
Yeah, exactly. It does treat you as like the player and like the newcomer to this city. It does treat you with respect in that way, where there's no characters that are like, oh, hi, George, my best friend of 11 years. Do you remember when we did this thing in elementary school? There's nothing like that. So that's a good observation there. It's also set in, I believe it's set in the 90s. So we do have a little bit of that like throwback setting too. Like there's an internet cafe. Kids are not carrying cell phones around and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool to hop in the time machine that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's listen to a bit of music. We will come back and talk about audio and visuals. First thing you'll notice, I think, when you boot up A Space for the Unbound is the pixel art, I think, is gorgeous. It's bright. It's colorful. When you are doing that little opening scene, you will get introduced to both types of like the art that's portrayed. You have like the regular side-on view, adventure game style view, but then you do have these short, very lightly animated cutscenes, we'll say, but like these full screen pixel art cutscenes that are really, really nice. So I think that this game is really, really good looking.
Just gorgeous. I think there's a stigma with pixel art indie games because pixel art is so nostalgic, where you think NES, SNES, Sega Genesis type eras were like, oh, this is when we were working with resources that we had. But seeing just the cutscenes you mentioned, these full screen ones are like immaculate. There's some amazing set pieces where you're like, dialogue's happening. By the way, look up. And then you're seeing you mentioned earlier, like the cracks in the sky. You're seeing all these different assets come into play or powers or characters doing their thing. You're like, wow, this is gorgeous. Pixel art just doesn't get enough appreciation sometimes.
Yeah, that attitude is... that attitude that like pixel art is old or something like that should have died in like the late 90s.
Easily.
It's when I think about some of my favorite games, like visuals, a lot of it is pixel art, and a lot of it's modern pixel art because the cool thing about pixel art is there are no limits to what you can draw and put on there. And I think this game takes advantage of that too, because we said we have that supernatural, that fantasy element to it. And as you go on and on in the game, it does get more wild, more trippy, more, apocalyptic in ways. And those more imaginative settings and scenes later in the game are really visually striking too. And it's just, pixel art can bring whatever you have in your head to life. And big credit to the artists who worked on this game, because it's gorgeous when you're just walking around the town. And then when you get into that supernatural stuff, it's really well drawn up there too.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it.
Also, again, shouting out that setting in the 90s suburban Indonesia, the designs of the houses, the kind of open air design of like the shops and stuff like that. Really enjoyed just, you want these settings to look authentic. And of course, I'll defer to the game director because that's where they're from. But, with my limited experience in the country, this is what houses and temples and convenience stores and things like that, this is what my memory of them looks like too. So always cool to see things that you're familiar with in the real world put into video games. There's so many games that we play are fantasy worlds and stuff like that. Yeah. So seeing the real world represented is very cool too. Yeah.
Very like small type setting, right? And again, it grows as you progress. But yeah, as you mentioned, in any other game, you're talking castles, giant craters in the earth, outer space. But having such a supernatural story take place in such a very mundane setting, it feels so bizarre, but it fits really well.
Yeah, for sure. Suburban fantasy. Yeah. Music in A Space for the Unbound is credited to 3 people, and apologies in advance for my pronunciation. Mazdito Bakhtiar, Christabel Honora, and Bambang Iswanto. Those are the 3 people credited. Please send all of your complaints to Danny about my pronunciation. Yep. The music, I think, is really good. You have the nice, like, piano and strings based energetic stuff as you're going around town, when you're in the school early on in the game. It sets the mood. Like we said, when you're in the beginning, you have that carefree, we're skipping school slice of life stuff, and the music kind of reflects that. I'm hanging out with my girlfriend, skipping school. This is fun. And then later on, when things get more serious, the emotional music carries that emotion really well too.
Yeah, there's the track in the schoolyards, the one that I say sticks with me the most. I couldn't sit here and hum it, but the moment I hear it, I'm humming along.
Yeah.
But there's a whole section of the game where you're setting up for the school festival. So you're running in and out of hallways and classrooms, and this song's playing on loop. And I remember just bopping my head the entire time. To then like the end credits-esque song, or like the final chapter 5 ending, like there's a vocalized song, and I'm like, that one hit different. That one was like, it's such a pretty song that I'm like, that's got to go on a playlist somewhere. That was immaculate.
Yeah, this happened to me several times in games. So like a lot of games will have music without vocals throughout the entire game, and then they'll throw one song with vocals at the end credits. Yep. And there's something about that, thinking about like Nier Automata especially. And this one too, the end credits song is called Within the Dream, and it has vocals and stuff. And so as you're processing what happened at the end, and then this song comes out, sometimes that song with vocals can just break the dam and like you're just, crying your way through the credits, which is what happened with me at the end of this game. Because like we said, the ending is really powerful, but like you're still experiencing it as the thing is going. And when you finally have time to sit back and think about what happened, and then something about the vocals kicking in, it just does something for me. So big shout out to that song called Within the Dream.
Yeah, no, you mentioning it being like the thing that breaks the dam. I'm not one that retains information if I don't read it aloud. So there's moments like if I'm not reading that dialogue I'm like missing important points, right? So as I'm reading this, I'm putting like my whole acting chops into this, and I'm like, sad moment, let's put that gravel in the voice. There's a character in here that might be the coolest fantasy character I've ever seen in pixel art form, and I'm going to love them forever. But like I'm doing a voice for this character, and I'm like, I'm very gravitas, and I'm putting this whole energy into it. And then like as I'm doing these sad moments, I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I should be an actor, dog. I'm really good because I'm crying over here.
There you
go.
Yeah,
then this song kicks in. I'm like, okay, there's the floodgates. We're done. We're done here today.
Yeah. So overall, visuals, music. There's no voice acting. It's all reading, and I think it has the boop a doop a doop a doop a doop sound effects when dialogue's going on the screen. I don't love that, but it's not. I guess it's not loud enough in this game to really bother me. So overall, good visuals, good music. Everything supports the story and the setting and the emotions that you should feel.
Yeah, I think if you're a Minecraft player out there, some of the sound effects are very reminiscent. I think that the bloop-a-doops for dialogue is very like, if you were to rapidly place something in and out of your inventory, I'd be like, they stole that from Minecraft. The walking on dirt is a very Minecraft crunchy noise. So I'm sure they're not directly ripped, but like my instinct, I'm like, oh, that's Minecraft. Yes, I love Minecraft.
Gameplay in A Space for the Unbound, we mentioned earlier, is the old school point and click adventure style, where you click to move around on the screen, you talk to people, you're going to pick up items to solve simple puzzles, or kind of set off this domino effect of, I got this key so I can get this person, they'll give me this item which will help me do this thing over here, and so forth and so forth. At their best, I think in this game, they are simple, not very complex, I mean. So, for example, in that first chapter, you're building a shelter for a cat, and you need to go out and get, a piece of sheet metal. You need to find a bowl for its food. You need to find a pillow, I think. So you go out, you do some tasks to get those items. You come back, you build the cat shelter. That's what I mean by simple. I don't think that these are like great, but I was engaged. It's simple enough, not frustrating. It's fine. I'm very drawn along by the fact that Raya made money appear in my pocket. So I need to know what's going on. So I'm cool with that. We talked about earlier, though, I think there's a point in the game where these get too complicated, too backtracky. And I don't mean complicated as in like, I don't know what to do. I mean complicated as in there are too many steps and it takes too long to do each step, especially when you start nesting subconscious within subconscious and stuff like that. You have like multiple worlds you're hopping between. I did not like, again, this is in that like chapter 3 section, the ultimate version of these adventure game puzzles I did not enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, with the chapter 3 ones for sure. I mean, I've already mentioned how those just kind of drag at a point. There's a few puzzles later that I think just get convoluted, because they're within rift after rift, or we're doing these space dives, right, of going into one, but then in that space dive there's another space dive, which is fine, but then you're getting 3-4 layers deep. There's even one later, and I don't know if you struggle with it, but there's like the pipes. You have to like select which wheel does which one. You have to move the water and everything. I got pissed after first, and I'm like, there's a walkthrough. Where's it at? And I'm like, cool. Wheel, turn, out. I'm done with this.
Yeah. So within those, so there are those like adventure game item puzzles, but there are also more traditional puzzles too, like follow the path of the pipe. And you can only use a couple of these pipe junctions to get the water from point A to point B. There are puzzles like that too. So again, it's just like this was compounded because I was also frustrated with the story during this part. So it's like neither part of this is carrying me through. It's just, I trust that I'm going to find something cool about the story once I get all this stuff done. So I'm going to keep doing it, but I am not happy about what's going on right now. So there was that. The one thing that I will say is that throughout the entire thing, even during the puzzles that I thought were not additive to the experience, we don't get into the randomness of puzzle solutions that something like Monkey Island or something sometimes get into, where it's like, you need to interact with this object in the world and the key item doesn't make any fucking sense. It's just like a random thing that's like a joke, and you're like, I would have never figured that out. That never happened in this game. That was always very clear, where it's like, I went here, I picked up a crowbar. I know exactly where I'm going to need to use this crowbar. You know, stuff like that makes sense to its credit.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because where I thought I had to use the crowbar was not correct. And then I stumbled. I'm like, oh, shoot. Now use a crowbar. Then okay, got it. So I missed the step in between those. But I was like, got the crowbar, back to where I need to be. Not where I need to be. Uh-oh. Shoot. Yeah. Now what?
So let me ask you a question here, because this is something that I've been thinking about as Disco Elysium got this on my brain in the first place. And then recently playing and doing the podcast about 1000 Times Resist got me thinking about this too. Both of those games made clear decisions to cut gameplay when they thought it would not be additive to it. Disco Elysium has no combat. They had a combat system and they cut it because they decided the game would be better without it. And I think they were right. 1000 Times Resist has almost no gameplay. You're just walking around talking to people. I kind of think this game would be better without these adventure game elements. I would rather just go from screen to screen, maybe do a couple of space dives and like some simple things, but like there's a point where this is a puzzle game, and I don't think that part's very good. So it got me thinking, like, sometimes people decide that less gameplay is actually better for their game, and it sounds counterintuitive, but I do think that this game probably should have scaled this stuff back.
I think to some degree, I can agree with that. Like I mentioned earlier, there's the moments of like, I enjoy that I ran into someone who mentioned an item that I'm like, I don't know what that has to do with anything, to then 3-4 people later be like, oh, I do know where that guy is. Let me run back there. Or like, there's a broken down truck. He's like, I need someone to inflate my tire. I'm like, I got to figure that out. And then you run to a guy. He's like, you ain't never seen a tire shop before? I'm like, that's not a tire shop. That does not look like a tire shop, but I know where I need to go. I'll be right back. Like, I do enjoy those. Though I do totally see these moments of like, I ran into this character like, oh no, we got to get back to the school. And the school is on the other side of the map, which this easily could have been a snap of like, narratively, we're just back at the school. We could do that. But instead I have to run through 4 to 5 different alleys. And if something would happen there, like I'm interrupted by the bully, or a character's like, quick, something's wrong with your mom, or like something impedes a story there that is still also story, I would totally get it. But the ones where there's nothing that is really stopping me or getting in my way, it's just I have to walk from point A to point B, I think that could definitely reduce and like shorten some of the padding that's in the game. But yeah, I think back and forth, there are ones that I'm like, I could totally imagine if they took this puzzle out or this, go find these items. And then other ones I'm like, I kind of enjoyed those. So I wouldn't mind meeting in the middle on that.
Yeah, I definitely didn't. I mean, to be clear, I didn't hate doing every puzzle in the game for sure. There's just that one section that is just puzzle after puzzle after puzzle. And I'm just like, what are we doing right now?
Dave hated the puzzles. They were the worst.
Yeah.
He already asked for a Steam refund. From Matt.
From Matt. Yeah, Matt, give me $10. So the other thing is that when the story does kick into high gear and, you know, we do the last couple chapters, there are almost no puzzles. So it's almost like the people who made the game were like, we shouldn't have puzzles. The story's going. And that makes me wonder why we needed to do that middle section the way it was. But you know,
no, that's fair. I see that now. Now that you mention like, and that being beat for beat, we just kind of, and that's only really interrupted with a couple little combat things, which again are so minimal. You're doing these like hell divers type deal, like hit the couple buttons and the combat's over. But yeah, even thinking about, the end there where it is just the story is running. Now I think I'm a little more on your side with that. I could see that where I'm like, ooh, that did hit really hard where I could just go and do the important part. Yeah, for sure.
It's, when the story is going all story, it really does do some great stuff. You mentioned those combat mini games, and this game's full of, we'll say, little QTE or timing based things. The one you'll probably do the most is the kind of Street Fighter stand-in. You have to, press the buttons that are shown on the screen in the time limit, and then you have to do a little timing mini game to block attacks from the opponent. And there's quite a bit of this. I thought these were fun. I don't mind QTEs in the right situation. And I think that this game actually does a good job of putting these in to mix up what you're doing gameplay wise. And the music is really good during those fight scenes. So that's fun. The way it's all presented, the side on, sometimes you're fighting things that are very visually cool, we'll say. So I thought these were pretty fun, despite being very simple.
Yeah. I could take them or leave them. I don't think they overstayed their welcome. I think there were these struts where like, oh, I did a fight like 2 hours ago. Oh yeah, I have to do this again real quick. They weren't always just slapped in your face. But also because they were so simple, I could easily see those just being replaced with like 2 lines of dialogue. It would really take almost the same amount of time to be like, read these 2 lines. I already did my input and won this fight. So, yeah, like I said, take them or leave them. They're fine. I don't, have any hatred towards them.
Yeah, I don't think this game would have been worse if it didn't have these. Like if you didn't fist fight anybody in the game, I don't think this would be a worse game or story. But, teenagers will scrap from time to time. So
start swinging.
Yeah, so these aren't bad. And there's other little mini games throughout the game. There's a section that has like a little Ace Attorney type courtroom testimony cross-examination mini game. So this game does wear a lot of its... I don't want to say like gameplay influences, but like the games that inspired the creators, they do have little references in here for sure. And they're pretty good.
Yeah, they're awesome. One that's right out of their own pocket in chapter 2, I think it is, where you run into the movie theater and there's someone outside playing the violin. She's like, I forget the song from my boyfriend, which leads into like a chain of different like musical events that you do throughout. Mm-hmm. That's actually from the team's first game when the past was around.
Oh, okay.
Which is about this girl who's dating an anthropomorphic owl. It's kind of weird, but they're kind of a hot couple. But she's like, I can't, remember my boyfriend's songs when you introduce it to her. I haven't played that game in a couple years, so I don't know if it's a copy paste of the song. But the moment you go in, I'm like, her outfit looks familiar. And then you release this owl from the cage. I'm like, that's exactly what that is. That's really cool. I love that.
Nice. Yeah.
I have no idea if the rest are anything related. As I look here, yep, the Raven monologue. Yep. So all these like musical events are references to like the team's other games, or at least Toge ones. I don't know if they're specifically Mojiken, but yeah, that was a fun little exciting thing for like the indie guy. I'm like, oh look, it's another game I played. I love that.
Nice. Yeah. So overall, I think gameplay is, we'll say, a mixed bag. It ranges from, hey, this is kind of cute, this is kind of cool, bouncing around doing the little button combo Street Fighter stand-in, to frustrating and compounding what I think is the slowest part of the story. You always want gameplay and story to work together, and I feel like in the worst part of this game, gameplay and story hold each other down. That's not what you like to see. But overall, big range, we'll say. Yeah.
It's always hard, right? When you're like, these are the things I didn't like, or I want to critique them a bit. And outside looking in, like, that can sound so terrible. And the amount of times I've had to be like, just so we know, I still love this game. I may not have loved this part, but it's a lot easier to talk about things you didn't like or even hated compared to like, I really like this thing. It's awesome. You should experience it yourself. And as I sit here, I'm like, yeah, I didn't love this part. This part was slow. I still like grand scale walk away with like a great experience in this. So I always like double back. I'm like, just because we didn't like it doesn't mean we didn't like the whole package. They're just, this could have been quicker. This could have been nicer.
It's the nature of what we're doing here. We're critiquing the entire thing. So if there are things that didn't hit well for us, we'll talk about those too. And then I think when we get to the spoiler section, there's going to be a large chunk of that where we're talking about things that are excellent. I just can't talk about them right now. But it is, it's important to talk about, especially in these narrative heavy games, what is it actually like to play these games? Because if the game is asking you to do something, then that something should be additive to your experience. And that wasn't always my feeling with this game in particular. But
for sure,
I think that the thing that a lot of people are going to take away from this game is not the puzzles or the little combat mini game. They're going to think about the story. So we can get into our kind of wrap up section here before the spoiler section, where if you have any kind of thoughts in summary, let's get those. But also, Danny, what kind of person would you recommend play A Space for the Unbound?
There's a lot of people, when I go back and I put my air quotes on cozy, right? I think there's a specific type of game you see when you think cozy. You think, I'm going to be happy, it's going to be goofy. But I think cozy can really be anything that brings you joy, as long as, I guess if you want to call Doom your cozy game, go nuts. I don't know.
Bloodborne is my cozy game.
Listen, I don't like Souls games, so I won't say not a bad one, but I'll let it be a good one for you. I think people who love just a good story, I think, like we've mentioned, the gameplay there, these mechanics, the fighting and stuff, they're all very simple. And though sometimes they're a little long in the tooth, like I don't think there's any kind of skill gap or skill check in this game. If you just want something to sit back and explore the story, right? You can just do that. So I think anyone who's ready for like a really deep narrative, something that's going to like make you feel something this weekend, that's the kind of person I think should check out Space for the Unbound.
Yeah, agreed. If you value storytelling in video games, then I think this is one that you should play, with the caveat that I do think that you have to play the entire game to get the good part of what this game's story is doing. I don't think that, I think the game starts out with a good hook, and then it just takes a long time, basically to the last chapter, to finally reveal what it is actually about. And when it does that, it's really good. So if you go in with that knowledge that it is coming, the good part is coming. And I got reassured by some people in the Discord server when I was playing, and I was like, hey, I'm like 7 hours in. I am not feeling this game. And people were like, well, you're close, so just trust us. Yeah. So everyone out there listening, you can trust Danny and I that what's coming is worth it. So that is who I would recommend play A Space for the Unbound. Also, like I've mentioned several times, if you value seeing other people's experience, maybe hometowns or home countries that are unfamiliar to you and your experience, there's great value in video games that do that to give you a more well-rounded view of the world and different experiences that people have. And there's, I feel like this gets worse, the discourse around this thing where it's like, well, this isn't set, in America, so I don't give a shit. Like, you see that kind of sentiment out there. The main characters aren't white, so I can't identify with it. These are real things that I've read people say about video games, and it's just such total horseshit. So the value that you get from seeing a game set in suburban Indonesia and the kind of culture and community there, you'll learn something by playing this game about that kind of place. And I think that there's great value in that too. So I want to shout that out one final time here. So before we get into spoilers, let's do ours. Let's do our plugs, and we'll start with you, Danny. I mentioned at the top, you stream, you make YouTube videos, you host a podcast, you do a lot of stuff. So tell people more about what you do and where they can find you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we stream on Twitch on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Usually we're checking all kinds of indie games out. At the time of recording, timelines are weird. We're playing through Dungeons of Hinterberg. Me and a couple of friends are doing Chained Together over the weekend. We're loving the indies. We're always checking them out. Meanwhile, on YouTube, typically we'll do any kind of reviews and recommendation videos. I just finished both my reviews for Arranger, a role puzzling adventure, as well as Valley Peaks. Those are both great games if you want to hear some more about that. And then, of course, we do have Playlog Podcast, which is me and my buddy Topher, aka Play Nice Kids. We're covering whatever indie news is going on, what indie games we've been playing. And we're starting a monthly book club. Like I mentioned earlier, we just did Night in the Woods. We also announced this past week that we'll be doing Kentucky Route Zero, a game I've never played. So I'm excited to finally jump into Kentucky Route Zero. And we have a few down the list that we're going to get back to. But yeah, we just two guys who love to talk about indie games and found out that no one around us is doing that. So we're like, we need that friendship circle to do it. So you and I are talking indie games.
Mm-hmm. And I love the focus on indie games. I've tuned into your streams many times. I love the vibe on your streams. You just have a great attitude, and it's a fun place to be and hang out and chat with you as you play through the games. So I'll recommend that. And if you want to check out that book club on the Playlog podcast, by the time this episode comes out, I don't know what your release schedule or cadence is like, but Kentucky Route Zero is probably going to be over by the time this comes out.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So people can, that's the beauty of podcasts and YouTube content and stuff, is you don't have to be right on it. You can play and catch up with those things as you go. So Kentucky Route Zero is a super interesting game. So I'll be interested to hear what you all think about that.
I'm excited. It sat my PlayStation for a minute, and I'm like, do I do PlayStation or do I do Steam? We're going to find out, but we're going to lock it.
Yeah. So good stuff and highly recommended. And I'll put a link down in the show notes so you can check out Danny on Twitch. You can check out the YouTube channel, and you can check out the Playlog podcast. All highly recommended.
Oh, shucks.
So for myself, you can support this show the way that we always say. Ratings and reviews are very helpful. So when people search for podcasts about A Space for the Unbound, they might find this one and future episodes of the show. So you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and the podcast is also on YouTube. So if you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, whatever they turned Google Music into, the podcast is there too. You can listen to my other podcast called A Top 3 Podcast, which is a simple pitch. We do top 3 lists and draft topics. It is a comedy show. It's a good time. You can join the Discord server if you'd like to join the community. It's a very friendly place, and there is an invite link down in the show notes. We would love to have you in there. Come talk about A Space for the Unbound, whatever other games you're playing, what movies you're watching. Share pictures of your pets. Please share pictures of your pets. So that's the Discord server. It's a good place to be. And last but not least, if you want to support the show monetarily, you can do that at patreon.com/RealDaveJackson, where you'll get some bonus episodes. You'll be able to vote in polls for what games I do on the show and a bunch of other treats. So that was a lot of talking. I'm going to catch my breath. We're going to listen to some music. And when we come back, it's full spoiler time for A Space for the Unbound. Dave here, and before we get into spoilers, I want to do some announcements and give some thank yous. First of all, over on the Retro Hangover podcast, I did another guest appearance in the King of Games 1996 tournament, which is in the semifinals now. And the semifinal matchup that I took part in was Quake versus Super Mario 64. Again, that's on the Retro Hangover podcast, so if you want to hear which game won and advanced to the finals, check the link down in the show notes and go give that a listen. Also, my other show, A Top 3 Podcast, just celebrated 100 episodes, so please go check that out. If you have enjoyed that show or you want to check it out, that's a good place to start. It's a fun one. And also, I want to say thank you to the patrons who help support the show. Big shout out to Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast crew, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Ficori, Jill, Jeff, formerly Jerf, Kieran, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Randall, Jake Martin, Jenny E., a new patron, Jared B., and many more. Thank you to all of you. Your support is much appreciated. And with all of that being said, let's get into full spoilers for A Space for the Unbound. All right, Danny and I are back, and it's full spoiler time for A Space for the Unbound. And as usual, this is not going to be a linear walk through the story. We're going to talk about things that you learn in the last chapter of the game right now. So, for real, spoiler time for A Space for the Unbound. So, the game is kind of told in reverse. You're kind of left... we'll say the game picks up at the midway point, basically. You're missing all of the backstory, and then you're going through like the events of the game, but you don't really know what you're actually doing. You're just kind of like grasping at threads as you're going. Atma doesn't know what the hell's going on. He's just doing his best, basically. What you end up learning about is the backstory with Raya and with Nirmala and with Atma, the real Atma. So starting with Raya here, and this is one of the things that we talked about that I think this game does really well, is you have a character that is going through it. And it takes a long time to get to that point. But once we do, we just realize just how bad of a place Raya is in and what's going on here. So before we talk about what's going on in the actual game itself, Raya's backstory. So Raya was new in town. The girl that you meet in the kind of dream sequences named Nirmala, that's also Raya. Raya's full name is Raya Fitri Nirmala. So at some point, she, I think, like decided to change the name that she goes by. A lot of people do this, right? Like when you're a kid, you'll go by your middle name, and then, you know, you're adult, you change. Actually, I want to be called this. So a couple things that are affecting Raya. Her dad is the absolute worst. He is an abusive piece of shit. And her mom is just trying to do the best she can. Like, you know, you get the sense that like her mom is not a piece of shit. Her mom is fine, but she just like can't do a whole lot. She's just trying, she's going day by day too. So it's one of those where like her dad is such a piece of shit that her mom can't help Raya the way she wants to because her dad is affecting her that much too. So you get that. One of the times that you learn this is after you get the high score in Future Fighter, which is the Street Fighter arcade game. There's a scene where Nirmala wishes that someone would say, a teacher would say something nice to her so that her parents would feel proud for once, because her dad is just constantly like, you're such a disappointment. We spend so much money on your school. You are worthless, all of these things. So yeah, once you get through that, like the scenes that take place in their house are, they're pretty tough.
I luckily come from a loving family where this has never been something that I have to deal with on a personal level. But that is always so tough to see because I feel like there's stigma sounds like the wrong word, but there's this expectation that like parents are there to love their kids. And I know that's just not the case sometimes. And seeing it reflected in a video game where like this girl wants, she's trying to be creative. She wants to write stories and work on art. And the dad's just like, why are you failing math? You're a disappointment. You suck. I can't believe we gave birth to you. You're embarrassing me in front of everyone in town. And like, he's just berating her for existing. She takes one breath wrong and she's just getting locked in her bedroom. And it is so rough. And I feel so bad for her when this is like first revealed at the beginning of the game where like it is Nirmala. And you're like, oh, I gotta sneak in the house to get the magic wand. And then it's like, it is Raya. I'm like, oh, fuck. I hate this. I hate this so much for her. Yeah.
And she can't like follow her passions. It's that kind of classic story thing where like she wants to write, she wants to draw. Her dad is like, that is a waste of time. You're not doing that. You need to, you know, work to get a real job and stuff like that. So there's that clash there. So she has no refuge at home. And this is more important as we learn more about her because she's also bullied at school. The character Eric, who's the bully in the game, did bully her and ran over a cat that she was taking care of with his motorbike and killed the cat. There is an upperclassman who Raya like looks up to, but does not like being compared to. And like Raya makes a mistake organizing that festival and they take control away from her and they say like, you know, Lulu did it way better than you. So there's that. Her friend Marin is, it felt to me like one of those things where like you have your friends in elementary school and middle school, and then you grow apart from some of them as you get older. People get different friends. But Raya didn't make new friends when Marin did. So Marin like made new friends and was hanging out with them. Raya didn't make any new friends. So she felt abandoned by that, which was also very tough to see once you learn what's going on.
I hate some of these characters, and like it's so weird because it's not always their, sometimes not their fault. I think Marin is a weird one where I think you're right that it's just drifting apart, but I think something that's like heavily implied throughout the whole thing is that like Marin wants to do creative things, Namala wants to do creative things, but one of those has parents who are buying her the 48 packs of crayons and that he can get art lessons, while Nirmala has a dad who doesn't approve of these things and she runs away from home so she can just go and do some doodles on like overdue rent paperwork that she has on the table. Like they're two very different lives. So seeing Nirmala with this like level of envy of like, I wish I could do half a fraction of the things that you're allowed to, or like your parents are proud of you doing, and I just can't. And I think that's kind of after Nirmala goes through so much of seeing like what she can't have, eventually just like, maybe if I'm just not around the things that I'm jealous of, I'll just feel better, or hopefully I'll feel better. I think that's the rough one with Marin.
Also, I mean,
Eric sucks.
Marin's not completely like guilt free, because there is that part where Raya's getting bullied like super hard and Marin doesn't step in to like help out her old friend. Cause if I remember right, I think it's her new friends that are doing the bullying, I think. Yeah.
They're all kind of blank face like characters. So I can only like, towards the end, there's another great moment with Raya that I love, where she talks about some of the other characters. That's a Lulu thing. But yeah, I could totally see that in the world of like kids suck. Kids are terrible human beings. We should even call them that. But they're not thinking I'm hurting someone's feelings. They're just like, I'm having fun. The people around me are having fun. And even though Marin sees that distress in her old friend, I could see both the fear of being the one to be like, hey, stop doing that. And not to say it's excusable, not to say it makes it okay. Right. But like, I could see why she wouldn't step in at that point, but it doesn't make it better.
And I think that like, Marin's new, like she was the newcomer to that group. That was the feeling that I got. So it's like, you know, she made a choice and it's probably not the right, it's not the just choice, but that's, you know, being a teenager is rough, and trying to find some place that you belong can be tough. So it's a nuanced character with Marin that I thought was really nice. Same thing with Lulu and Eric. Like I think they introduce them in different ways. Eric's like a piece of shit when you first meet him. He's the worst. And then you don't like, I didn't like come around to like loving him or anything like that. Sure. But it is more nuanced than he's presented at first. And then Lulu, you get introduced to in a way that you might like her. And she was another one where I kind of finished out this like backstory thinking like, it's not Lulu's fault that people are comparing Raya to her. It's not her fault that people wanted her to do the job of organizing the festival again because she did it well the previous year. Like those things are not her fault. But in Raya's eyes, Lulu is presented as this villain. This is the person I want to be, and they're taking me out and putting her back in.
Yeah, I think Lulu appears to be like the innocent one. She hasn't done anything. She's just like, she's done the other thing right. So then everything, she's like, hey, last year we did this. Can I go to this person and get some help? Like, oh, you're only doing that now? Lulu had that done months in advance last year. Or like, why are your grades bad? Lulu's grades never drop below this. And like every time, like in that whole chapter, you see someone mention Lulu and she like breaks down like, again, stop bringing it up. And then like for like the end where you're having like this motivate, like as she's kind of conquering each one of these people, like talking to them, this is what I felt, talking to them, this is how I felt. Yeah. There is that scene where Lulu in herself is just like, why can't you be like me? You'll get like, I'm me. I do it right. You'll never be like me. Her friends are backing her up in that same kind of little argument. And I was like, damn it, Lulu. I thought you were like, you were just innocent enough. I'm like, damn it. She did it too. Yeah. I can't stand her.
So these are like the three kind of villain characters that are introduced. And I say villain in quotes. Only Eric is really presented as a villain. Yeah. They're introduced and in this like dream world that's constructed, they are a wrench in the gears for what Raya wants. And she just tries to remove them from it. We'll get to that in a second. So to recap, what's going on with Raya? Her home life is terrible. Her school life is terrible for all of these different reasons we mentioned before. And then the biggest thing is that she had a friend or a boyfriend, I'm not sure, named Atma. I'm going to guess it was a boyfriend because that's in her ideal world that she creates. Atma's her boyfriend. So Atma died in a river flood, just like the opening cutscene. That was not a dream. That was real. That happened. Yeah. And after that happened, the grief combined with all of these other things that would make her, depressed and just having a terrible time, all of this like compounds. So what this game is, and what Raya's superpower is it's not a superpower. The whole thing is taking place in her mind as she's in the hospital after what's inferred to be a suicide attempt. And part of it is because after the game is over, she wakes up in a hotel or a hospital room. Yeah. But also she's the only character that would have committed suicide, and there's that content warning at the top. So if you're keeping track, I guess. So that's what happened. So that's all of these things. And like, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking like, wow, this game must spend its entire runtime going through all of these things that happened to Raya and all of that, that's not how this game goes. Mm-hmm. And so all of these revelations that we learned, aside from Raya's dad being a piece of shit, all of these are in like the last 2 chapters, mostly in the last chapter. Right. So this is what I meant in the non-spoiler section, where this game takes, in my opinion, too long to get to the point. Like the emotional core of this game is unavailable for most of it. And I wanted to get your thoughts on like, how did you feel about the way that this was all laid out? It's so backloaded with what the actual important stuff is.
I think in the way my brain was taking the information, right? I was very much like, in the moment, here's what's relevant to me. And like that first chapter where you're like, this is Eric. Eric is the villain of this chapter. He's the one we have a problem with. We go through why Eric caused problems, where Eric runs over Admiral the cat. And like, that's a big problem for Raya and like what that turns into. Ultimately, that being the first like real shock value moment of the game, where you make this bucket list. One of the bucket list items is to eat like a whole cake, the whole Black Forest Gâteau, like, right?
Yeah.
And you go and get it for, you get the ingredients, you get him to, we call a lot of people grandpa. I don't know if just Atma has 1,000 grandpas or if like, it's just a term of endearment, local
cultural
type
thing.
deal.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I figured, but just in case you're like, nah, dude, a lot of grandpas out there. But yeah, you get this cake. Eric's like, nah, I got to apologize to her. He knocks you out, takes the cake, and he's like, I'm going to apologize for both the cat by getting her her favorite dessert.
Yeah.
Which just makes her even more pissed off. So she like literally just obliterates this guy. Like just in this dream world, just force choke, pops into nothing. And this is the first time Atma's like, did you just kill that guy?
Yeah. What the
and
fuck?
Like, yeah. And I'm so locked into this where I'm like, this means something for someone. But I think at this point, they've like almost villainized seems too strong, but we'll say like villainized Raya. Like she's
the villain for like I would say chapter 3 and 4 at least. Yeah. She's presented as the villain. You have to stop her. Right. You don't know why. You don't know what's motivating her to do this until the end. But she is the villain for a while. And I thought that was, I guess, the one thing during those middle sections that I was thinking was, this is an interesting narrative thing they did where your girlfriend and your partner, main character that you're going through the events of the first couple chapters with, now she's the villain in the story. And I thought that was interesting. And that's not necessarily the case, but it was what I thought at the time.
Yeah. But I think in the way they choose to establish like that, right, where they do make her the villain and you're kind of chasing after her and you're like, hey, she'll typically walk by you until she doesn't. So then you replace her with Lulu until like her end comes. Then you replace her with Marin until her end comes. And this entire time, like in my brain, we're going for the direction of like, this is our villain, to then be like, let's turn around and find out what really happened. And I think that's kind of where the misdirect goes. Because again, you're playing as Atma the entire time, which again, isn't a real person. He's
right.
Well, it is a real person, but our Atma's like a figment of like an imaginary friend. He's called an imaginary friend multiple times by Marin. To kind of make up for this lost friend that she had when she was younger.
Yeah, and I wasn't clear if before the suicide attempt, if she had this imaginary friend, or because the Atma that we play with that does all the memory hopping and stuff, is like a physical representation of her memory of Atma, the person, which is, you know, a lot of games that deal with grief will come to the conclusion that the memory of that person is always with you, that person's not totally gone. And that's, you know, instead of like that being something that comes up in conversation or a conclusion in this game, you actually play as that memory, trying to help Raya as she recovers, we'll say. So this all takes place in this game world where it is a mixture of Raya's inner turmoil and then her fantasy world, basically. So she wants to create a world where she and Atma can go through and do the things on her bucket list without any of those negative outside forces messing it up. So that's why, like, when Eric becomes a part of it and he starts to fuck things up, because it's her memories of him doing something bad and then apologizing, like you said, like, sorry, I killed your cat. Here's a cake. You know, that pissed her off. So that negative memory then becomes a character in her dream world. Same with Lulu, where like Lulu's not really doing anything bad in the dream world, but she's there and Raya doesn't want her there.
Yeah. She's an obstacle to her happiness. She's just like, stop existing so I can be like just happy, because I'm always going to be compared to you.
And so that's what happens with Eric, with Lulu, and with Marin. She basically reaches that same point with all three of them where she's like, you cannot be here. This is my dream world. So she turns them into monsters, which I think is just kind of the way that she sees them. She sees them as monstrous people. And then she, like you said, snaps them out of existence in the dream world. And again, that first time that happens to Eric, I was like, holy shit, she killed that guy, because you think this is the real world at that point. Yeah. So I think that this game, it's either on the Steam page or it's like, it's not a secret that they're trying to keep, that there's something supernatural here. Yeah. So I think that bait and switch is really good, actually, where they're like, Raya and Atma have superpowers, but it's not superpowers. It's all a dream world anyway. And you can make anything happen in your dream. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the whole thing is writing a storybook as a kid, and like, tailors into where the one character splits into two, where you have Raya, who is the North princess, I think it is. And they're both space princesses. That one is like, I'm happy here and I don't want to leave my place. But at the same time, I'm lonely, so I want to find new friends. So Raya is the princess that leaves to go find new friends. But that is her shedding that creative part, the part of her that has the connection with Atma, the thing that's kind of dragging her down and making her like the odd one out that everyone's bullying, to then move on to her new life, which is still no better. But then you see those come back together, and you even have Bosk, the first cat, who is like such a badass looking character. I love this fantasy version of Bosk. But yeah, with them being turned into monsters, Atma's even like, why is she doing that? He's like, oh, we're not doing that. That's what they look like. She's just taking off that shield. These are monstrous people. They're the bad guys.
Yeah.
She's just showing everyone else what they actually are. And that's that misdirection between like her mindset and what's like actually going on.
Yeah. And that the way that it ties in that story that they wrote, where the events of the story loosely follow the events that are happening in, you know, Raya's real life story, where I think that having her change names, and they say like push away Nirmala. So it's like, basically the person I was before Atma died, that person's gone, and taking with it all of like the childlike, you know, joy and curiosity and creativity and all of these things. And all I have left is this person I became after this event. And that's like part of the healing process, is getting Nirmala back with Raya at the end. Yeah. Pretty interesting how it's, again, like they there are a lot of things up in the air. And so you would go through a lot of this game and be like, I don't know what's going on with the story. I don't know what's going on with her making people disappear. I don't know what's going on with her and why she's doing the things that she's doing. I don't know if this is the real world or not. Yeah. And all of those things come together in the last chapter. And when they come together and you realize what everything means, it's really, really good. I just wish that I wish that it didn't all come at hour 9, you know?
Yeah. I think, because I mentioned already, where like my brain's in the moment. I'm thinking, where's this going to go? But I guess I don't think back to where I'm like, this was problematic because it slowed down my experience for XYZ outside of the courtroom slow down missions.
Yeah.
But again, if in a world where I would go back and play this, knowing what the end is, knowing how this game wraps up and like where it's going to be, I think both will be in the spot where I can kind of analyze, like, interesting. I can now see this is something that I wouldn't have noticed the first time around. But also I'm like, man, it does take that hop, skip, and a jump to get from introducing the bad guy, the villain, to them being like, no, the villain is just troubled or this, that, and the other, or the people we're seeing who are the villains, or misunderstood, or however you want to interpret, you know, the way they treated Raya and everything. So yeah, I think first time through, I'm less affected by it being so backloaded, because I think in a movie, it's a lot to do without giving a lot of those hints of what's going to happen. How do we end up here? But in a 5-chapter game where you're now unpacking everything in the end, getting all emotional, seeing why these guys are bad, but also why it's still kind of Raya's like issue to deal with, or what she's unpacking at the same time. I guess unfolded fine for me.
Mm-hmm. I guess if you did replay it, you would catch all those bits of foreshadowing that when we're playing it for the first time, there were a lot of things that came up where, you know, like there would be like a little bit of dialogue at the end of a chapter. You know, it shows like a screen of just like the sky, and then a thing will come up that says like, you know, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be a good person. And you're like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who they're talking to. And then, okay, moving on, I guess. So if you did replay it, you would probably have a better idea of what that is. It doesn't change the fact that you don't really know what the game is about until the very end, and you're just kind of floundering, I think, for a while. But not to say that there is no foreshadowing or anything before that. So what's going on in the story here is that Raya has created this dream world where she can just kind of live out the life that she thinks that she wants, which is doing these things on the bucket list with Atma. But the dream world becomes more and more unstable as you go. And you are told that it's because there's a transgressor. That's the word that they use in the game. Where I thought at the time, oh, okay, there's like Gigas from Earthbound is coming, like an alien or something is coming that's going to like shatter the world and cause the apocalypse or something. This is before you know it's a dream world. I think what they meant by that is our Atma that we control, because by helping Raya through the healing process, as we end up doing, that is what breaks this world. And so we have like an interesting thing, I think, where this coming apocalypse ends up being necessary. Like this is a good thing that's going to happen, but all the characters that inhabit this world think that this is a bad thing. Raya doesn't want this dream to end. She wants to just live in here forever. So there's a part of this game where you're treated as the invader, I guess, because you're going against this wish to have this dream world continue. And I think like part of what is going on with Raya is that she needs to not like face her past or like defeat her past or something, but she needs to accept that this happened. Basically. And that, you know, them putting on like the defenses for you, Atma's the transgressor and stuff, shows me that when this game begins and for a while, Raya's not ready. And that's part of like the journey that you go on.
Yeah. I wrapping it up and trying to piece together how it all like plays in, what is dream, what happened to Raya, how is she in this hospital bed, like piecing that all together. I kept thinking about again, the misdirection of like, we're playing as Atma. Atma's the hero, which they call him in the game, but he's like our playable character for like 99% of this game until like that final walk towards the end of like recovering from everything Raya's been through. But I can't decipher whether it is this is the dream that she has no control in. Everything's happening just like when you dream, and you might have that little moment of like, in my dream, I fought the bad guy and whatever. Or if it's more of a childlike wonder playing with her own toys. And if that's the case, Atma being like the hero, the one that she's playing with, wanting to decipher and fix her problem, wanting to save the princess and be like, here's what's going on with me. My hero is going to do that. But that would imply that she obviously knows that she has a problem. And there's a character who the entire time is like, hey, everything's going to be okay. I'm here with you. But like, we can't stay here. We can't stay here being like, wake up, like go back to real life. So trying to figure out how much is just the state of a dream. Like she's just living through what is well, up to a certain point, a better world for her, or that she knows what is reality. Even though she wants to escape into this dream world, Atma's still the person trying to get her back there. Yeah. So I'm like piecemealing both of those, like which one's a little more accurate to it.
Yeah, I think the first one you said is where I kind of land on it, where this is a dream that she's having, and kind of to me seems like when you have a dream, like you said, like it might start out where like things are cool. I'm having a dream where I'm doing something nice, and then like something happens and you're not in control of the dream. You're just there. And that happens to Raya several times. Right. And there's a bunch of times where she like kind of like snaps the dream out, and you like, you know, wake up later when things get out of her control, and she realizes even in this dream world, she can't control what's happening. You know, Eric is there. He shouldn't be here. Stuff like that. So makes me think that this is more of like a natural dream, maybe lucid dreaming in a way, but not totally in control of what happens, which is why she tries to reset it several times throughout the story.
With crazy and crazier stuff.
Yeah, that didn't work. Okay, now, more kind of like more desperate, like you like the last dream where she's like this big blue, like goddess looking figure. Like that's like, okay, this is my new dream world. We're not just doing my bucket list. I'm the god of this place type of thing. Yeah.
And then even the couple steps ahead of that, right, where she's just like, on the bucket list, we want to launch our own fireworks. And you're like, she's going around town that entire chapter trying to find someone. Like, do you have fireworks? Oh, you don't sell those anymore? Blip, you're out of my life. Like, oh, you thought you could buy some today, last minute? I don't think so. We're closed. I have to go find my son, which you murdered last chapter. Right. Like, snap him out of existence, right? To end the chapter is like, you know what? Fine. I'll do fireworks. And then that crack in the sky is just shattered open with a giant meteor that comes down and explodes. And we're like, well, that escalated. Like last chapter, you killed a kid, which not great. Put that out there. Not great. But now you just like nuked this city again for Atma to wake back up at the desk. Like that's the reoccurring thing of like, we start a new day at this desk where we're having our introduction to the story. He's like, shit, another crazy day. I hate this.
Yep. Yeah. Always waking up back there. Yeah. So Atma's like the realization is that Atma is a memory. And he's there to try and help her along the process. I'm going to listen to a bit more music and then come back and talk about that process. So the process of Atma helping Raya, I think, is really excellent in like the nuanced ways that they talk about how to help somebody that is very depressed, somebody that might be suicidal, right? It seems very intelligent to me, the ways that Atma interacts with her once Atma realizes what's going on. The ways that he interacts with her and the ways that they portray her feeling and what she's tried and things like that. So we already talked about she kind of distanced herself from her past because Raya blames Nirmala, her younger self. She blames Nirmala for Atma's death. So she banishes Nirmala from her character, her consciousness, basically. And one of the other things that I liked really early on, once you realize that this is what's going on, is a lot of, I don't want to pin this all on games, but a lot of media, when dealing with depressed people, will say, oh, well, you should try being kind to yourself and stuff like that. And like, I've said that to people too. Like if someone's down, try not to beat yourself up, be nice to yourself. And Raya says, I've tried that for so long, it doesn't work. I can't be kind to myself. Nothing is helping, which I thought was very well realized, that she is not at this point where daily positivity journaling is going to help her. She's beyond that at this point.
It's rough, right? And again, coming right off of talking about like Night in the Woods, not being very like depression heavy. My partner Topher is very open about, having depression and relating to this game so much, where I always like want to double back and make sure that I don't, step on toes and impede on anyone, where I'm like, I understand that like you have depression. I could never relate. I could only sympathize. Right. And I know as a potential people pleaser, I don't want someone to feel sad. I want to be like, yeah, just feel better. And I realize like that is probably the worst thing you can hear. That is probably so frustrating where you're just like, you don't think I fucking tried? Of course. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I would double back. Like, what do you want me to say? You just want me to be here? Which is kind of what Atma does at the end. You have this, he wants to encourage her, and then you kind of have this new personification is the wrong word, but you're in her childhood house. She's locked in her room, and you keep going up there, and she's like, leave me alone, leaves. You give her some time, go back up again, a few more conversations, leave me alone. Eventually you're like, I'm just going to sit in the chair until she needs me. And then time will pass by for you, and you have the conversation again, wait in the chair again until she's ready. And I think she has, for Raya, having that comfort of like, I don't need you now. I don't want you now. But the comfort of having him when she's ready for him, I'm like, cool. I like the way that was kind of played out.
100%. I really like that they could have done any number of fantasy things where you fight your demons, or we've already had so many supernatural things, and they could have done literally anything to any scale. But what they did was they put it on this like superhuman level at the end. When things are really important, they say, like you said, Atma goes up and says, hey, do you want to talk? And she says no. And he goes, okay, I'm leaving. I'm available though. And like slowly she talks more and more, but she always hits a limit, and she's like, okay, that's all for today. And he's like, okay, I'm not pushing. I'm available though. I'm always available. Which I thought was just really nice, because as you said, like your tendency, you want to try to help people. And my tendency also is to want to try and help people talk through what's going on. Because that often helps me. And it's taken me a long time in my life to realize that that's not what you should start with, because that's not what works for everybody. And it might work for somebody in this situation, but not this situation. So I just thought this was a really intelligent thing for the writers to have Atma do in this situation, to just be there. Literally, sometimes that's all it is. He's just available. So that was really good, in my opinion. When Raya does open up, she talks about basically how she sees everybody out there. She's in her bedroom, so looking out the window, she sees people that look happy and stuff. And she asks Atma what makes him happy. Atma says that it's the ordinary things that make him happy. So she finally kind of opens up and tells him, like, I created this world because I just want to be with you here. She's alone. She's scared. She needs this person back, and he's dead. So the only way is to kind of fabricate this world where she can spend time with him. And part of the thing is to kind of talk her into like, this might feel good right now, but this is hollow. It's not, this isn't real. And at a certain point, another thing I thought was really good about this process is that Atma does all he can to help Raya, but at a certain point, she needs to go by herself. Yep. And he leaves and she has to go on, and she's really scared. And she talks about how scared she is to go kind of be around these things that caused her these traumas in the past. So I thought that was a nice touch too.
Yeah, that was definitely, I was bawling. I was just sitting here sniffling while I'm reading all this dialogue, because Atma's like acknowledged, like, I'm not real. You know, I'm not real. And though like he hits her with the, I'm always there for you, like in the most emotionally support way you can be, obviously he like literally cannot be there for her. He is dead. He is just like this figment. So this is that opportunity to kind of ease her into like, hey, I'm here. Again, you can't see me. You see him fade away.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here, but I'm not. And she walks through this tunnel like alone and interacts with all the things that impede her, right? Until you get to like that fourth one, which is like, Dad, what are we going to do with that? How, like, this is when I really need some support. And when you get that like emotional support and you think it's Atma, it's like, oh, it's not Atma, it's somebody else. And maybe we'll start from the beginning of the track before we get to that. But I think they handle that really well to establish like what she will have to do moving forward, not having actual Atma. So
yeah, exactly. So it's that Ruki is going nuts out there. So it's that thing where like, again, with that character going through grief and that kind of realization that person that she lost is there in a way. But when it comes down to like, actually, I guess, taking that step, that's got to be her. But he's there for everything that he can be there for in that way. So Raya it's presented in the game as she's walking along this path, talking with the characters that had caused her the trauma in the past. So she talks with Eric, she talks with Lulu and Marin. The characters kind of come to a bit of an understanding. They don't fully forgive each other, which I think is great and very well realized. Like, you don't have to forgive everybody. And that's not how people work. People are not just going to forgive each other in every situation. So that's good. And then the last one with her dad, which I thought was great. She doesn't forgive her dad. She tells him to fuck off and that she's gone off. She's going to live without him. And her mom is there to help too, like you said.
That one felt, I don't know why. I don't know if I have some deep rooted something I got to unpack on my own, but that one felt really good. That one felt so good. Cause it was this, she is, again, with Eric, like he's apologizing. And then like later, as we go through the epilogue, there's a little more of that of like, you know, kind of where we're at with their apology and whether he's ready to say it or not. And then I know with Lulu, I took a screenshot. Hold on. She had said, you don't get to decide my value. I'll be whoever I want to be. And I'm like, fuck. That felt good. That felt really good. But yeah, like watching her like kind of come to terms with all these people, like, I'm better with you. Hey, we should go get a drink together at some point, whatever. Then getting to Dad, I'm like, this, I can't fathom a realistic way where she just goes like, it's okay, Dad. But she does in the way of, it's okay. Some people don't mesh. They can't intertwine, even like father and daughter. So bye. And I'm like, fuck. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking back to it. I'm like, it felt so good. Like, I can only imagine, again, we're looking at a screen with pixels. So like, how realistic, but I'm sure someone on the planet, right, has been through the emotional, I say I should, as if it's not realistic, the abusive parents and everything, and wishing they could have just been like, you're not a part of my life so long, and how good that would feel. Like, I was rooting from the stands over there. I'm like, yeah, get it, Ryan, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, again, not my personal experience, thankfully, but, you know, plenty of friends that I know who have cut toxic and abusive parents out of their life. And that's what they need to do in order to live their best life. And it's unfortunate that family can be that way sometimes, but it's really well represented here in the game where some people just don't deserve your forgiveness, and the best thing to do is just cut them out and move on. And that's what she and her mom do at the end here. And then the last one, this is the one that made me cry, is she talks to the cats, and she apologizes for not protecting them. And the cats say that it was their greatest honor to spend time with her, which I've had pets my entire life. And this is what we hope for our pets, right? We can't talk to them, but we hope that they feel that way, right? I mean, my dog likes me because I feed him and take him for walks and stuff like that. But we just hope that we're providing the best life for our pets, and that's what the cats say to Raya here. So that was great.
So nice. I'm not a cat person. This game put a lot of cats in my face. I'm like, I can live with it. I'm fine. A ton of cats. But yeah, like I fell in love with Bosk the moment we saw them as like a silhouetted character. Like we didn't even see them yet. And in the final chapter, we get like the full view. We see the wings, we see the beak, and kind of like what kind of weird chimera this original actual cat, you know, like Nirmala's actual cat. And when they're introduced to Admiral, which is like the adoptive cat that we've made this hut for, which is in this dream world, and kind of what these two, both of her cats finding each other, one male, one female, hanging out like, hey, I think we're done here, but don't worry, I'm going to take care of her. And she's like, you better, I'm going to scratch you. I'm like, oh, fun banter between like these cats. Like, that's great. But yeah, no, that was really sweet. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And then after that, so Raya's kind of like, I just like how they present this. Like she made peace in a way. She didn't conquer all of her past trauma. She just kind of faced it a little bit, met it head on, dealt with it in an individual way for individual people along the way. And then it's time for this dream world to come down. So she has one final conversation with Atma, and Raya says that she doesn't want to forget everything that's happened here, because I think she realizes at this point that this world is not real, and when it's over, this Atma that she's talking to, he's going to be gone, which is, you know, it's going to be very sad for her. But Atma says that moving on is not the same as forgetting, and that he'll always be there. And it's that thing in stories that deal with grief, where this is the lesson at the end of a lot of those stories, that those people will always live on in your memories. And, you know, they may not be in the room with you, and you can't talk with them, but they will always be there in a way. So I thought this was interesting. Did you get all the bottle caps?
I did get all the bottle caps. I missed a couple others. So I was mad about it.
So there's that one scene after you get all the bottle caps, there's a memory of Atma and Nirmala looking at a bottle cap collection. And they talk about what the most treasured thing in their life is. And Atma says it's his memories because they can't be taken away. It's the only thing that someone can't take away from him, which is... This happened way earlier in the game, but a little foreshadowing for one of the big lessons and themes at the end of the game. Yeah. So Nirmala wakes up, Nirmala, whatever she's going to go by now, wakes up in the hospital. And the end of the game is like the only part of the real world that we see when she's back out there. So what's happened at the end, it's a flash forward a little bit. Raya's mom divorced her dad and they're moving away. Raya is writing again, which her mom is happy to see. She asks Raya if she will write about the bad things that happened too. And Raya says that she will, that she's not ashamed of her story and what happened. And then, well, before the last part, another just very nice, smart touch from the writing team is that Raya goes and takes a walk around town. She talks to the characters in real life. So she talks to Lulu, she talks to Eric, she talks to Marin. And what I really like about this is that all is not well.
Yeah.
She did not forgive them. Things are very awkward between a lot of them. And I thought this was just very real.
Yeah. 1000%. Because again, with Marin, it's a repeat of before, right? Like Marin is interning at like a book publishing company. Another case of like, you are still ahead of where I wish I could be. Like I just started writing again. And I think she does a great job of not letting that jealousy hit, but she's like, hey, this is my boss or someone I'm talking to. Like he implies like, hey, I could help you get published. Just, reach out whenever. But you can still see those, man, she's still like umpteen million steps ahead of me where I want to be, but she moves on with that really well. I teased at it earlier, but like when she's talking with Lulu and Lulu's like, hey, like I'm doing great. Becky's doing this and Shanique was over here doing this thing. And then like Raya interrupts like, hey, real quick, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care about any of them. And Lulu like silently, like, oh yeah. No, I guess that's fair. Yeah. And then there's the lull. I'm like, oh man, another good one. I'm like, yeah, tell her. I don't give a shit about what your friends are doing. I don't like them. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like that, I guess, new pep in her step. But it just feels very real to me that the fact that Raya has taken a big step in her recovery doesn't mean that she forgives everybody, doesn't mean that she likes everybody, and it doesn't mean that all of those bad memories or actual bad things that those other people did to her, it doesn't mean that that's erased. All of those things are still real. So I think it's likely that like if the story continued, she would never talk to some of these people again. It's just, she saw them out on the street, they had an awkward exchange, and one of the things where it's like, yeah, let's get a drink sometime. Yeah, sure. Maybe we will. But
maybe we won't. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
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 And then Eric's too exists. Yeah. Eric's is the, which you have like the kind of apology in the dream world. And now you're kind of back here. We have a very different looking Eric, a lot more clean cut, which another one where I kind of went back to, when was the last time she actually saw Eric? Like in real life, is she kind of remembering the childhood antsy, like I'm going to bully you, Eric, like the running over the cat, how much trouble was caused from just remembering who Eric was. Yeah. As opposed to like what Eric actually did. But he hits her with just like trying to say, I'm sorry. He's like, I don't think I'm ready for that. And there's part of me, I'm like, you're a little selfish for that, but also like maybe he is, I've done a lot of bad things and I don't think I'm quite at the place to even be asking for forgiveness. And she's like, yeah, reach out when you can. And again, another spot of she could easily be like, if he doesn't, oh, well, kick rocks. If he does, cool.
Yeah. And the game ends after all of those. She goes out to the bridge that Atma was on when the meteor came down. She goes out, she takes in the sights because they're leaving town. One last time looking out at the city. She sees, the sky and stuff. And she says, Atma, are you seeing this? The sky looks so beautiful. And that's the end of the game. So Atma is with her. She remembers this this journey that she's been on, we'll say. And that's the end of the game. And it's just interesting to me that like in the spoiler section here, we've had so much really good content to talk about and so much really good discussion about what this game gave to us from a story perspective. And all of this is like chapter 5. Most of this is in chapter 5. I have not talked about really anything from chapter 3, maybe a little bit of chapter 4 going on here, but there's I hate to bring it up again, but like it's driving it home that like so much of this game I think is really good and really important and really well done. And it's all at the end.
Yeah. I guess I argue, right? Like, let's say we piecemeal this, we cut it into slices and kind of place it further, right? If we take, this is bad pacing, but I'll go with it. So we finish the first Eric encounter, she pops him, whatever, but we see then Raya in this depressive state, walking through the darkness, interacting with Eric, and we get like that set piece earlier, or at least we know that like maybe the suicide attempt, we know that existed from the beginning. I'm wondering how impactful it would be, right? If I know from the get-go, Raya tried to commit suicide. She's in the hospital. Something about that. Maybe not all the details, but enough to know that like we're in dangerous territory. How that would have changed me progressing through it. Would I have looked at it in a lens of like, man, there's a lot of sadness around this? Or would have been like hunky dory, boyfriend, girlfriend, skipping school, dang it, the bullies here, dang it, the mean girls here, et cetera, and not really have seen the true scale of it until it really hit, you know?
Yeah, and that's what it is. It is a kind of bait and switch, like we said. Like when I started the game, based on what I knew about it, I thought that it was going to be Raya and Atma working together to stop the apocalyptic supernatural event, because that is, I don't know where I picked it up, but it's from something. It's not a secret that there are supernatural and apocalyptic things in the story. So like hiding that and this story with Raya's dream world and her ideal life being shattered, that's the apocalypse. And like coming to terms with what all this is and how the story that Nirmala wrote with Atma, how that fits into everything. There's just a lot up in the air. And this is where like, this is the sin, right? So I talk about how like, oh, it took too long to get to the point. Off the top of my head here, I'm not going to come up with like an alternate way of telling the story, right?
A lot to do.
But it is part of the experience of playing this where things are up in the air for so long that it's no guarantee that somebody's going to get to all of this wonderful stuff at the end. So the one thing that I will say is in chapter 3, when you are doing all of those space dives for people in town to try to clear the path so that you can get back to the school so that you can confront Raya, I thought that section was bad. You have this like pressing thing. We have to get to the school, and to spend 2 hours doing adventure game puzzles that are like, again, you're learning a little bit about the characters in the town, but they are not really relevant to what this game is actually about. So that is the section where like, I think you could have just cut all of that. Like maybe space dive one person to have them move a truck so you could get in the school. But like, I keep coming back to the fact that, again, for all the story content that we talked about in the spoiler section, there are like no puzzles during any of these sections. There might be a couple of space dive things where you do a little bit of something. You might have to find a key or something like that.
Flip a couple switches, back out. Yeah,
you have to like go into the past, crack the school back wall, then travel into the future so you have a hole to go into. Yeah. Like there's stuff like that. But when the story is at its strongest, there are no puzzles at all. And it makes me wonder why that section that's like all puzzles and no, plot revelations. I don't want to say no story again, because you're learning about characters, but you know what I mean? Like that section there, I don't know what purpose it really serves other than delaying you getting to the good part.
Yeah. If this was a 4-chapter game, we have our epilogue at the end, but we kind of cut out 3 or even just piecemealed a bit, because that is chapter 3 establishes why Lulu's a problem for Raya.
Yeah.
But that again is only established at the end of each section. You have the teacher who's like, I'm a military general. And then you have to go out and find like, I actually found your teacher paperwork that has your name on it. I found a picture of you and your father. I don't need to
space dive that teacher. I don't need to space dive the karate instructor or the martial arts instructor. I don't feel like that stuff adds anything to the game except time. Yeah. And maybe there was a feeling, this is just guessing, it could be completely wrong, but maybe there's a feeling that, we have these gameplay things in here, we need to do them more. And I don't think that was super helpful. But again, and this is where I think we'll wrap up. Yeah. Despite those sections that dragged, that both of us kind of agree, like to some degree, we agree that they were not adding a whole lot to the experience of, learning about the story. When I think about this game in 6 months, or in 2 months when this episode comes out, or in 6 months or a year or whatever, I'm probably not going to think about that. I'm going to think about the ending. I'm going to think about how this game touched on the themes and what a wonderful job it did at those things. So all in all, I do think this game has a lot of value. The story has a lot of value. It's just a little kind of unfortunate that it didn't always feel valuable what I was doing.
Yeah. I think is always a weird one because I'm like, I think if you think you're going to enjoy a game, like go for it, play it. I understand everybody's financial place is different. I can easily see this being one. If you think you're invested in the story and you want to see it, I could totally see recommending someone like, hey, go watch like Space for the Unbound, the movie on YouTube. Go watch the cutscenes or somebody's Let's Play and still get that same experience. Yeah, I don't think that's as beneficial to the studio, but it is like the word of mouth thing, but you still get to experience everything we did where you don't have to play through the annoying parts. But no, I think I wouldn't take back the experience I had with this game. Sure, there's things I would change. If there doesn't need one, but if there would be like a Space for the Unbound 2, I could see places where they would want to clean up or take out some of the extra meat that's really just kind of padding out the experience. But great narrative. I think it had like a gem with this one.
Yeah. And, valuable games, good works of art don't always have to be perfect. There are flaws in a lot of things, and the things that you and I talked about as possible flaws it's not necessarily how everyone's going to experience this. The overwhelming thing that I hear about this game and that I agree about this game is that the story is heartwarming and touching and really good at the end of the day. So that's what we're going to take away from this. So, really good conversation here in this spoiler section, talking about the journey that we went on with Raya and Atma. And Danny, thanks for taking 2 hours to go through it with me, man.
Absolutely, homie. You let me know when you want to talk 2 hours about an indie game. You want to do Cuphead? We can talk 2 hours about Cuphead. We can.
I had a Cuphead episode ready to go, and then my guest had something come up and we never recorded it. So if that gets released out into the wild, I know who to hit up.
There you go. There you go.
Well, cool, man. Again, I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate your takes on everything that happened in here. And at the end of the episode, I'll give a shout out and a recommendation for everybody to go on down in the show notes, find that link to see the stuff that Danny's doing, whether you follow him on Twitch, check out stuff on YouTube, listen to the Playlog podcast, and anything else, because Danny's busy. He's doing a lot of stuff, so there'll probably be new stuff popping up all the time. So I give a recommendation to go check that out. And as always, tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
What if I just stopped that time again? But everything I'm holding is everything I believe in. But today I have found myself again between the sliver of time, the secrets of a lifetime. Once you've seen them with your own eyes, and you can't let go of all ties, it's not too late to realize life's a paradise.
Hey,
Oh, hey, Jeff.
what's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm one half of Superpod Saga, a topical variety video game podcast fueled entirely by nostalgia and unleaded gasoline. Superpod Saga, we discuss a different video game topic each and every week. We have new episodes every single Monday covering a different video game topic. More than anything, we want to entertain our listeners and make you feel like you're one of the boys, like you're hanging out at a campfire with some of your best zany caffeine-powered buddies movies, and just talking about your favorite games and all that stuff, stop on down to Super Pod Saga. It's on every podcatcher there is. If it's not, let me know and we'll get on it. Again, Super Pod Saga, stop on by.